Awesome. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Really psyched to have the conversation. I think so many of you guys reached out in the last, 48 hours, 72 hours, and had so many good conversations. So lots of really good stuff. I think we're making some really great momentum. So I thought maybe today we would just kind of kick it off with a breakout session. And in the breakout session, instead of just green, yellow, red, let's really launch into having a question. Why don't we share with each other, like, how did we get started in your career, and just share your story. So let's see how that goes today. And then, anything that you guys find interesting, just put it up in the comments after we get out of the breakout session. So, all right, Brandon, you ready to go to breakout?
We are ready to go. We'll see you guys in about 6 minutes.
All right.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi there.
Not there yet. You feel like
This
for the last.
yeah, exactly. It's like for tetherball or something.
Exactly. Okay. So fast. Well, hey, we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about today, and super psyched to jump in. First off, I think I wrote in the note that Jen and Chris Stanton and I are working on an article, hopefully to put it into HBR, on kind of how a mid-manager would adopt open talent. And we're going to do some research, and we really need your guys' help to do that research. But I'm going to let Chris and Jen talk about the article a little bit and the outline and what we're thinking about. So take it away, Chris, Jen.
Sure.
Thanks, John. So Jen and John and I have been reflecting on what we've been hearing in calls over the last several weeks or months. And one of the things that we realize is that there's an enormous amount of embedded knowledge within OpenAssembly that many people would benefit from if we tapped into it sort of systematically and put a thought piece together. And so the piece that we were considering writing takes two observations and then tries to look at the intersection of what those two observations will mean for the role of managers going forward. And observation one is that the move to remote work or the move outside of the office has required different skills or a different managerial approach for many people who have tried to make that transition. And I'm sure your introspection probably reflects that some people have done it more successfully than others. The second observation is that the move to open types of models for talent access also requires different skills than what you would think of as a manager who's sitting in the office and managing a persistent team of people who see one another face to face on a daily basis. And what we're, I think, trying to position this piece as is, one, to just understand whether the types of things that a manager needs to do in this new environment look the same for remote versus more open or sort of less persistent types of talent. And then two, whether we can document best practices for making that transition. And then a related goal would be to say, if people are having trouble making that transition, can we just document where their pain points are and whether there are things that we could point out that may help people overcome some of those pain points. And so I think that this is a topic that is probably sufficiently broad that everyone has a viewpoint, and we'd really like to be able to figure out a way to use your viewpoint to try and provide some voice around some of these things that are really important changes in the managerial landscape. And so that's sort of the broad overview. And then I'll turn it over to John and Jen to see if they disagree with me or if they have sort of other perspectives.
I think you hit it right on the head there. There's I think there's an interesting dichotomy, especially the more I talk to managers on sort of thinking about, look, we used to be able to operate in this space. It was touch and go, you could look over the shoulder and so on. And then one, as your employees are, figuring out digital skills and how to work together, I think as managers are thinking about, well, how does this translate both with the soft skills and the hard skills, the managing the task list and so forth. And how do we do that? I think there's a different cadence. I think there's a different set of skills. I think some people who were doing a lot of remote work, and organizations that do a lot of this, you guys know how to do it really well, and you hire managers who do it really well, right? So Morris, like, I was thinking about your organization, and you guys have just done this for 15 years and at Top Coder. But for those of us who be on site, it's different. Even with my own team, where we've done some remote work, there's a lot of communication that gets missed now, where it's like, oh, that just really didn't come through in Slack, how important that is. And so we've had to structure, well, these are more email activities versus these are Slack activities versus this, I need you to be, we need to talk about it. So I think there's those kind of things that we like to discuss. And then again, there's a separate bucket of, hey, there's exciting gig work. How do we prioritize, problems and tasks and, some of the things that, even Paul has done in the space where, how do we think about this? And is there some agreement that, look, we need to look more into these sort of tasks to make them more universal. And these are things that you're leveraging gig workers for, as opposed to, it just being like, oh, we want people to do PowerPoints for us. Like, we get that. And I think everybody understands how that works. But at large, how do you, bring back certain employees? And John and I talked about this last week with Chris, where, you might be bringing some workers back to do some of these task-based things versus, what's the unknown out there where that somebody could probably do this for you, but you just don't have the network to be able to do it, and how to use platforms to get at that. So I think that's like the hypothesis again. And as we flesh that out, I think there's some various viewpoints from folks on this call, highly valuable. And that's been my observation as well, that we can sort of encapsulate that and write a very neat article around, this is the time and the space to continue to build on this sort of stuff. So it's not quite, I think, an in-depth playbook, but I think it's a good start to that, and how we sort of think about, giving us some framework to all of the valued experience and the stuff that you guys are bringing to the table.
Yeah, great.
John?
So thanks, Jen. I really appreciate that. So Chris and Jen and I talked also about the need to do some, research as well. So we'll shoot a note to anybody or everybody on the call, and, happy to, have you involved in the article and help us, try to figure out what the right data is and with some questionnaires. So Chris has got some great ideas on that, but we'll not take any more time here and just make sure we get you guys into the loop, into the conversation. I think it's a really good opportunity for all of us to kind of have a voice in this and come together as a group and put together something that will really, that could really shape opinion if we can get it into HBR and really drive some stuff. Cool. Okay, that's great. Next up, I got a great call from Brian and Karen and Arturo yesterday. I've been really struggling, lately with all the cultural stuff that's going on, just trying to understand, the Black Lives Matter and everything that's happening. And so I've been focused on really trying to learn, right? And for me, where I am on it has been, I watched 13th. I don't know if you guys have seen that, about the 13th Amendment, that documentary that's on Netflix. It's an amazing documentary, and just trying to understand the issues around all the things that are going on. But I got a really great call from Brian and Karen and Arturo, and they want to really kind of talk about some of this stuff, and then we're going to do a little Zoom poll here. So Brian and Karen and Arturo, you guys want to take it away?
Yeah. So I'll start, and I'll let Karen and Arturo kind of take it from there. So one of the things that is a fascinating kind of byproduct or benefit of the open talent sort of model is the notion that it democratizes equal access for everyone in the sphere. Everyone who wants to work theoretically can find a means or a mode to do it. One of the things that Karen and Arturo and I have discussed is, how do we ensure that we have equitable access and participation within the platform communities, and specifically amongst diverse communities, and also people who might not be given additional opportunities to do that. So we've expanded our definition of what we think diversity means to include things like veteran status or opportunity zone participation, because people may be, less prone to pursue these opportunities given geographies or things like that. Or one of the things like second chance workforces, people who might be have prison records. How would we engage those folks? So we've had a number of calls to this end, and the first step is to really determine what data is available, who's tracking what within their programs or their platforms. So John has been nice enough to let us kind of post a survey to measure, which people or which organizations are tracking some of the metrics that we identified as potential opportunities for us to explore. Based on those findings, then we'll come up with some further hypotheses and further action items. But the very first step before we start to test the hypothesis and the theory is to understand what data is available. So Brandon, I don't know if you can go and post, or Karen or Arturo, do you have any additional comments before we post the poll?
Great. Brandon, are you ready with the poll?
Yep, we can turn this on, and it should only take you about less than a minute to complete. So it's ready to go. Here we go.
Let's see it. So the first question is, does your program or platform, if you have a program, some of you people might not be platform players. If you have a program or a platform, do you capture diversity metrics in your talent population? Yes or no? If yes, which ones? And we tried to make this as expansive as possible on any sort of measurement that might be relevant or might provide certain information data points. So as you can see, we move beyond race and ethnicity to gender identification, people with special needs, veteran status, and the like. This is not meant to obviously name and shame, but really just to understand what data is out there that we can then collect from, and then we'll build some additional rigor behind that. Karen or
Brian,
Arturo, did I? Yes.
Brian, as you think about that, I mean, I've asked this question in the past, and I think what I get back from our platform is it is not legal to ask for somebody's race, that too in a work situation. So there is no way to actually get that information other than like visually. It has to be I agree with Shilpa, it has to be self-declared, but I think we've had even opposition to even asking that question.
Yeah, and that's also a suitable response, is that if you just, the answer is no, then the answer is no.
Okay.
And
hey Brian, I have a question on the survey. If the answer is no, is there a value for question 2 we should select? Because it doesn't allow us to continue.
No, you can still select it. I imagine if it says no, there's nothing that stops us from doing that. We can say, if your answer is no and you track it, we'd be curious. It's not letting you do it if you can, if it says no?
Right. Yeah, it says you can't submit it.
Correct.
Like maybe second chance workforce, and that way everybody else selects no.
Sheila, yeah, that's great.
Okay. Well, this is the first time I work with Zoom polls, so please forgive me.
Me too. That was very cool.
Yeah, super cool. All right, cool.
All right.
Any thoughts here? Anybody want to add anything as we do this? Arturo, anything to add here? No.
So I don't know if Arturo. So the idea is, as we all think about what we can do in our own individual and professional lives, can we use this platform or this collaborative to make a difference in this space? And the way that it's, the shape that's going to take depends on what we want and what we feel is useful. But I think it's also a demand that's going to come from the corporate side in terms of an opportunity to, as so many workers become dislocated, and there's an opportunity to bring in different types of workers and a push towards diversity. It's also an opportunity from a talent provision standpoint. So,
and just to build on that too, I think the success of the industry is dependent on the diversity of thought and diversity of background and all of that. So I think it's a conversation that we should be thinking about and how we can amplify the message.
Yeah, I'd also just offer that if you look into the platform marketplace, you'll see several of the communities are specifically designed for very specific communities. So the Mom Project, their demographic is 100% people who identify themselves as a mom. Yeah. And being able to capture in there, you're not going to be able to necessarily profile everyone on their workforce as fitting a certain profile, but if that is the community that they are targeting to service, you have similar platforms for the autistic community. So a variety of different ways that you can look at this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, you know, or partnerships or connections laterally, maybe.
Yeah.
Actually, I had sort of a tough time answering the question because we don't require it, but we do know it for reasons like you know, like John said. Like we have a vet community, we have a mom working from home community, but we don't require any of it. So my answer is no, but it was actually not a straightforward question for me.
Yeah, no, certainly not a straightforward question. I mean, what I'm having my team at HBS do is go back and think about all the cases that we have written that may have, you know, different types of protagonists. And just the act of sort of going through and looking at our networks in LinkedIn, or be it through the companies that we run, there is value to that mindful reflection. So this is what we're seeking to prompt here. Thank you guys for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Really, really appreciate that. I'm psyched to see the results, and you know, I know we'll get a chance to talk about those next week and go from there as a group. All right. Well, third subject on the call. I think I wrote some notes. You know, one of the things I've been totally digging about the calls is just the amount of collaboration and community that we've built here. It's just so awe-inspiring for me. I think one of the things that we found is, and what we talked about last time, is it's really great to meet every week and lots of good information, but how do we move kind of this kind of thought leadership and conversation into action, right? And so one of the things that we've been kicking around is the idea that, you know, let's take this group and let's figure out a way to create a workshop. We've been meeting kind of on a regular basis. In fact, the founding of Open Assembly was really a conversation that Diane and Steve Rader and Balaji and I had at Harvard about 1.5 years ago, so almost 2 years ago now. So the four of us and Catherine and Brandon have all been talking, and what we want to do is design a workshop that's going to be really able to get to the point of view to set, you know, how do we set standards, how do we create, you know, accreditation, certification, education, and marketing research and marketing. But Catherine's going to explain a little bit more about what we're thinking about, and we want to get your guys' feedback on that. Catherine, take it away.
Thanks, John. Yeah, thanks, John. Sorry, I was on mute. So it's very true. We know that we've had tons of thoughtful discussion here on all of the weekly calls, and we've been listening. And like John said, there's tons that we need to do together to create a lot more growth. And on our last call, for those that were there, Dean Bashi made the recommendation that maybe we should get together as a group and do this design thinking style working session together around it. And so we did take that to heart. We've been thinking about it for the last week. We were really thinking about it long before that, but we, kind of appreciate the pressure and the emails and everyone wanting us to kind of step up and really make something happen. So we're at the beginning stage of planning a design thinking sprint. We're coming at it with the hypothesis that everybody that's on this call believes that we do have an adoption problem and that there are lots of key areas where we could focus to make progress, like the ones that John just mentioned. So we're going to host some workshops with our partner. His name is Douglas Ferguson. He's from a company called Voltage Control, and we're going to be looking for participants from this group to collaborate with and shape the direction of the sessions. We're still working on all the details and all of the possibilities for the dates of the sessions, but we think it'll probably be something like 2, maybe 3 90-minute sessions or so over a period of a few days, so we keep the momentum. So I do want to introduce Douglas. I'm not sure if he's on the call yet. He had another appointment before this, but Douglas is from Voltage Control. His team is going to plan and facilitate the design thinking sessions. He's a full master facilitator of design sprints, of innovation acceleration, culture transitions, and change transformations. So if you think about all of that stuff, that's pretty much everything we need. He's also an author, and he's a musician, and he's based out of Austin, Texas. So we think he's a great partner, and his team is a great partner for this challenge. Doug, are you on?
I don't believe he's on, Catherine.
Okay.
That's our,
If he hops back on, let's let him introduce himself and talk about, a little bit about his background and maybe his experience helping groups like ours come together.
yeah, perfect. Thanks,
Okay.
Catherine. That's awesome. So let's just, I think just open it up. Would love to kind of get feedback on the three things we talked about today, and maybe call on some people to begin with. And just because I've had some conversation in the last last week with folks. But Kirsten, you wrote a great email last night, or maybe it was a couple nights ago, just on your perspective. So I'd love to kind of capture some of that in the context, or have you share some of that in the context of these three, topics, or any one of them that you wanted to kind of launch in on.
Yeah. Okay. So the email that I wrote, I think, was just a pickup of the last conversation and dovetails into this. So I don't know how much more new value I'll bring to this great discussion. But, for me, when I start thinking, on that baseline assumption, Catherine, that you pointed out, which is, the adoption side of this, and how do we start to look at ways to drive adoption, that's where I get, really interested, even on all the strategies in which we can create adoption. And part of that, I think, that I was talking about, John, was, around standardization and accreditation, and this opportunity for training, not just for people on the platforms, but as a way to kind of upskill the world, so to speak, and the value that can bring through new types of partnerships. So rather than, for me, just looking at adoption through, I think, what absolutely needs to be done, which is within the current kind of corporate environment, and how open talent can make businesses more efficient and all the things that we've been talking about, I also look to additional strategies that create new pressures, so to speak, to drive that adoption. So what could new public partnerships look like around accreditation that could actually create new motivation for the private sector to want to get involved? And similarly, I look at beyond just efficiency of today, how do platforms start coming together to solve problems that we're only just beginning to understand? So it's essentially more market making versus accelerating markets that exist. So I just have a lot of different ideas. So I even think around, perhaps, and it'll be really interesting to see how we start to form the design sprints around these, which are super exciting. Even thinking through the different mechanisms for adoption could be an interesting way to shape the conversations, because I think there's so many different levels of maturity that we could potentially think through, things that are a little bit further out and things that are more near term.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Great perspective. Thanks, Kirsten. Hey, Dean, any thoughts here? This is actually your idea, so I want to honor that, and let you kind of lead us through any more depth as we think about trying to do something. So,
thinking ahead. Great. Just thumbs up to the direction, the flow, the energy. This is what we need. Yeah, use the tool and technique to get to what we want. So really nothing more added there, other than what I like to do is, when people who are going to participate, to have some level of commitment, and to escalate the commitment to your commitment by whether we sign something, we raise a hand, or we shave off an eyebrow or something, so we remember that we're committed to seeing this through, because nothing's worse than a bunch of people saying, yeah, let's do this, and then in reality not kind of spending the time to commit to it. So that would be the only thing I add to it.
Great.
There you go.
That's great. Hey, I don't know, Dean, I don't know if you noticed in the chat that Balaji asked you, tell us about your new role. So, that's to ask from Balaji.
I did not. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I won't yet completely. Okay. But I just will say, yeah, I have moved on from TopTal, and I'm now at a company called Verticent. There's a lot of excitement around that for me. I'm happy to talk to people individually, one-on-one, about that. And then, we figure to be big supporters of OA, and I plan to be even more orange and in front of you.
Awesome.
Whatever that means.
Well, good. Apologies, does that answer your question?
About what Dean is doing next?
Yeah. You'll have to go online to figure it out, offline.
I do.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. I do want to ensure that we, as Dean moves on from TopTal, we still have TopTal as a part of the community in some way, given that they are a significant part of the community. And then Dean conveniently did not tell us what the new company does. Is it Open Talent? Is it something else? But either way, Dean is a positive force for this community.
Thanks, Balaji. Yeah, and I'll make sure OA is connected. We did connect with just so the representation from TopTal is here. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think Rory's on the call. So yeah, welcome Rory as a new participant. Well, cool. Hey, Pranish, any thoughts on coming together? I mean, you and I have had a bunch of good conversations about it. And I think you were so eloquent last week in pushing us to come together and build standards and certification and education, all those kinds of things. So any thoughts?
No, I mean, I'm excited by the idea. I definitely want to commit the time. I think, one of the things I love about this group is I'm always learning something new from the different participants and helping to really push the thinking. And so I think a chance to get together and do that in a workshop setting, sounds great. I think the other thing that was top of mind for me, and there was some interesting comments in the chat about it as well, was, I was just talking to some companies where it was interesting they really didn't consider their independent talent as freelancers when it was highly skilled talent. And so just that whole, it goes a bit to what Kirsten was saying as well, like that whole brand perception and how people view the industry today is definitely a big challenge that I think we all have to work together to shift.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that's a really good insight and one that's been persistent for a long time, right? And I think it's something that's really difficult for all of us. What do we call this, and how do we best, get it to a place that represents the right brand, and then how do we make sure that there's less friction around the terminology? And I think that's part of the reason to bring everything together. Hey, John Healy, you've been instrumental in the last couple of weeks pushing us to come together. Any thoughts from your point of view on just what you're hearing and what you'd like to see out of this?
I think I would just echo Dean's comments on commitment. I think it's real easy to get excited about what's here, but being all the way in, let's be the pig, not the chicken.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's great. And then Sajeev, I know, you and I had a great call yesterday, and I always really respect your point of view from the demand side and understanding things. Anything to add? Are you on, Phil?
I think Sajeev said he needs to leave. John.
Oh, he did. Okay. Cool. Well, let's just open it up. Anybody else have things to talk about or want to discuss in the context of either, the things we've talked about today and laid out, or anything else? Ava, yeah. What's happening over in Europe?
Hey, life in Europe is good. We really watch closely what's going on in the States. We just published our Black Lives Matter statement at 99. And John, we have a call tomorrow, and at 99, we're just launching our agency model, and we're wondering how we bring this to the world. And in case somebody is interested, we're really looking forward for a test client. We can give a free branding project too, and get a testimonial out of it to do some self-promotion. So that's my current project. Otherwise, what's going on in Europe? Lockdown's over. We go to vacation in July. Let's see how this works. It's 6 o'clock. So
yeah, good. A little bit too early for us for that.
Yeah, no, it's like
yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, I think one of the things that Ava and I've been talking about is they have a new agency, in a box, or what are you calling it again, Ava?
Studio.
The studio, yeah. And I think it's an interesting example of platforms creating curation layers, right? And that's, to me, what's really interesting. When I was talking to Steve Rader and because Noise 2, I don't know if you saw the news, but Noise 2 at NASA got announced to the partners, and there's some really interesting new formulations. Hey, Diane, do you want to talk about what you're doing on that? Because I thought it was super cool how you've kind of interacted, because you're kind of doing the same thing of creating that meta, that meta kind of curation layer. That's similar to what Ava's doing. Is Diane still on the
Sure.
call?
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, so thanks, John. So yeah, super excited about the opportunity and the opportunity to kind of work with a lot of folks on this call, but very specifically, Tom Cook, that is on the call here with us, is one of my partners. But and then of course the team at Fulcrum, Sean Ring. But we are basically, our proposal and our model is to basically take that marketplace model up to the meta level. So we're basically a meta market offering, really bringing together a network of marketplace partners and configuring solutions on the demand side need, and that's really what we're bringing to the NASA engagement pool, and really our focus is taking a kind of a source agnostic approach and more of a demand side design approach to configure the best open innovation or talent market solution in order to deliver value at scale. And so once again, it's a meta market model, and that for me historically, as many of you know from my experience at GE, that's my passion. Basically designing source agnostic solutions that can be applied at scale in order to drive kind of disruptive and optimized outcomes. I believe very strongly in putting together a complementary network of marketplace partners and configuring solutions so that they can kind of fold into the demand side operations at scale and drive really outstanding outcomes. So my partners in this effort are Tom Cook at Spacely, and the folks at Fulcrum. But it's exciting. We'll see how it turns out, and this is obviously a model that can be applied anywhere, whether it's public or private sector.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thanks, Diane. I really love that. And Kirsten, it really speaks to some of the thoughts that you and I had on that email last night, right? It's like watching this market develop is really, really interesting to me. And it's kind of getting, like it's becoming way more diverse kind of horizontally, but I would say vertically, creating those buffers and those ways to connect more deeply. And, with Diane's amazing experience at GE and all the things that she's had to go through, that's going to be I think a big solution, and I think we'll see a lot more of those kinds of solutions come up. So, who else has got anything to talk about today? Kind of leave it open and let it flow.
John, I'd like to.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go for it. Who jumped in?
Janice.
Yeah. Hey, Janice.
Hi.
Just so you guys know, Janice and I have known each other in Cuba, Illinois since we were probably 12 years old. So
since we were half the height we are now.
Exactly.
All right. Well, glad to be a part of this group. I just wanted to report in. We're an architecture design firm, and so we work with a lot of the CFOs and CEOs that are and HR people that are considering doing the remote work thing. And what we're seeing out there is that smaller companies are getting smaller, and some of them have, of course, gone out of business. Larger companies are responding to COVID with larger spaces. And some of our clients are online companies. Their primary product is online, and even those online companies are not accepting of remote workers, but were forced to recently. And conversely to that, what we're seeing is that some of the most conservative companies, like Southern California Gas, who is an essential business, of course, has, who has 27 floors in the gas company building downtown Los Angeles, is deciding to completely adopt the remote opportunity because they can see that it's going to benefit their bottom line. So what we're seeing and I wrote about this in the chat today a little bit, is that, I can't put any data to it right now, but it sure looks like from my observations that we're heading toward a cultural divide regarding remote workers, almost like we are red and blue states in America right now. So I would be, we're very interested in this topic. We're very interested in helping our clients embrace remote work. My business is a virtual company and has been virtual for 20 years. And we'd certainly like to participate in that design thinking so that we can help to ground those ideas in the reality of what we see in our marketplace.
Yeah, great, Janice. Thanks for the ad. Really, really great. Hey, Chuck, I know you wanted to say a couple things.
Yeah, I had an idea over the last week, and I wanted to just propose it and see what people thought. It seems to me, as knowledge workers, like we are, that are out there and able to work in a virtual way already, that maybe we should even embrace the gig economy a little bit more as individuals and sign up for any one of a gig economy kind of platforms ourselves, put ourselves out there and try and be a part of the experience, understand some of the obstacles and the barriers. So when you're going forward in everything we're trying to do here, either whether it's standardization or other things we want to do, you'd have a good insight as to what it would be like. And then I realized that, well, not everybody can maybe fit into one of the platform blocks. So there is one that is kind of an open block that just asks you to talk about what you know and be paid for that. So if you want to do that, I would be happy to facilitate and set that up. But I think if everybody was a gig player in the next little while, you might learn a whole lot.
Yeah,
I wonder what people thought of that.
That's a great idea, Chuck. I know, when we were doing some work with Paul, Paul, we worked on the Upwork platform, and it was really, really instructive. And I really, I appreciate Paul's, kind of willingness and ability to teach us how to use it. And it was a great experience for sure. Because I think it's important that all of us know both sides of the situation for sure.
Right. Yeah. So the one I have in mind is called Pick My Brain. And I put it in the chat a little while ago. But if you want to look at Pick My Brain, it's a platform that just monetizes you and your brain and shares it with the world. And that's an easy one if you don't want to maybe work on any one of the other kind of platforms, like coding or anything you want to do.
Great. Okay, that's awesome. Thanks so much. Hey, Paul, what's going on in your world?
A lot of really exciting things. I successfully was a grammar school principal yesterday, and I think I did an okay job. That's one thing I'm very, very proud of. I published an article on LinkedIn yesterday. I put it in the chat, and I've gotten tremendous response to it, and it's along my narrative around location bias and diversity. And so if you have the chance to read it, I think it's an important part of the conversation. One of the things that I really do believe is that location is a bias, and that companies, it's not about, hey, my employees can work remotely, but the companies are still hiring people even to work remotely within a 100-mile radius of their company. And so, in my opinion, that bias alone stops companies from being able to engage remote, on-demand, and freelance talent. And so I'm trying to build a narrative that helps large organizations see, and especially during this time, as they think about structural changes to how they engage talent. We have a very interesting window because of remote work, because of the diversity push and a lot of different things, where every part of an organization is willing to listen to new ideas. And so that article was a first attempt to do that, and you'll see a lot more push from me to lean into the word location bias and really talk to companies about their fiduciary responsibility as it comes to human capital. Because in many ways, I believe that companies are neglecting their fiduciary responsibilities to society, to their shareholders, and to customers. And so you'll see me be more vocal about that statement as well.
Great, thanks. That's awesome. Hey, Mark, I know you put up that you wanted to mention some stuff. You're in Mumbai. What's going on over there?
I am, yeah. Thanks, John, and good evening to everybody. I think we're entering a very interesting phase as our sort of lockdown ends in India. I went back to the office on Friday, and that's been a great experience. I think what's going to be very interesting is the fact that, as Janice said, there are deep cultural reservations, or she used the phrase not accepting. There are lots of Indian businesses that are really not accepting of the idea of remote work or work from home. They've been forced into it. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not those models are able to be sustained or perhaps built upon over coming weeks and months, or whether or not, if you like, the forces of reaction ensure that, we drop back into the old models, which are much more built around command and control, the need to have people in the office, the lack of trust, the feeling that one needs to have much tighter supervision. So I think it's been a very interesting period that we're about to move into. There have been some statements from some, large globalized Indian businesses. TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, will be known to many of you, who've said that by 2025, they're going to have 25% of their workforce working from home. Now, whether or not that's able to grow and go further will be, I think, very interesting. But I think the next sort of perhaps 6 to 8 weeks are going to be very interesting in India, because we'll get a sense of whether or not this experiment that was forced upon Indian companies is something that they're going to perhaps be more welcoming and accepting of, or whether or not, as I say, we're going to see things retrench. So I thought I'd just kind of share that with you.
Yeah, I think that I love that, and I really appreciate that, and I think that's certainly applicable to the global community, right? It's like this has been a great experiment in a lot of new things, and is it going to stick?
Well, as I said last time, I think the delta of change in India has been in some ways more significant than it's been in other parts of the world. Because in other parts of the world, this has been more of a sort of evolution, whereas in India, it's a really significant step change. So, and it has great potential. So I'm going to be very interested, and I shall report back in terms of, signals or signs or evidence that we see in the market here. But anyway, good to see you all. So thank you, and thanks, John, for the opportunity.
For sure. Hey, Mike Morris, any thoughts as we, kind of move towards a workshop? Any points of view that you'd like to share on that, and things that we should focus on? You guys have good work around standardization and certifications and stuff like that.
Sure. Quick ones, I guess. So one is actually, I really liked Paul's comment. Made me kind of light go on my head on that, the location bias. I wonder when is it not an impact? If it's like, somebody's like, hey, I want them in this time zone. Because we've been seeing some of that, and that's one of the things we've been saying is like, hey, let's try to align time zone, working hours, things like that. But that's an interesting one. That's an interesting byproduct of what's been happening. I'd love to hear more about that. I would say as the workshop, it's in the back of my mind is just making sure we've got enough voice from the enterprise user side of it, because we all have drank the Kool-Aid, right? Like, we're here for a reason, and what are the CHROs of the Fortune 100 thinking, and how do we make sure we have some of that, some of that opinion coming in, because it could be an area where it's a blind spot for us. Just making sure we have the right, in any sort of workshop or any sort of collaboration that we have, making sure we're getting that perspective in it. That's just something I was thinking of as we were talking through it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a super, super good point of view, and something we'll definitely want to architect into that, and to make sure we have the right participants in the room to make sure that happens. So thanks for adding that. Hey, Balaji, anything to kind of wrap things up? You're always good at, kind of putting a bow around things. You've got your mute on, Balaji.
Thank you. This is a challenge that I've been thinking about, just in terms of, at least, again, this is my point of view, personal point of view, so not a Deloitte point of view. I just don't think the unit of action that we've had in corporate America has been jobs, which is, let's diversify our talent pool, and as that's the fundamental unit of impact, is we are job creators. Let's spread the jobs to mimic whatever the population that we live in, right? I think that as an experiment or an initiative has largely succeeded, but hasn't made enough of a difference. right? So we all have diversity programs. Everybody has been doing that for at least a decade now, but still the world is what it is today, as you see in the Black Lives Matter movement. I just think we have to elevate our thinking, both as companies and also as freelance marketplaces, to say, what is the next role that we need to play in the society, in the economy, beyond the unit of impact being jobs, right? So I feel the conversation right now is how do we mimic the diversity initiatives in corporations on the marketplace, but that is not enough. So what is the, as Paul was talking about, the broader fiduciary responsibility, and as Kristen was talking right up front as to how should we think about our own impact, I think we just have to challenge ourselves as to what is the additional layers of impact that we should think about beyond the job.
Excellent, excellent. That's awesome. Cool. Well, we've got 1 minute left. Anybody have anything else to add before we pass it on until next week?
Maybe just another way to say maybe what Balaji already covered, but we've been thinking about what can we do differently as a team to drive empathy. We feel like empathy is the source. And so if we could create an activity that think more empathetically, whether it's Black lives or it's sexuality, it's region, whatever the subject might be, but the practice of doing something. I think that's what Balaji's saying. The emphasis has been on metrics, maybe not activity.
I just want to build on that really quickly. So I was speaking to a recruiting firm here in Boston, Koya Partners, and we're talking about diversity and inclusion. And one of the things they said is that the argument shouldn't be how do we increase more Black and brown or women in my organization. The argument should be more, how do we create an equitable system so that the application process is fair, so that everyone has an opportunity to equitably participate. So I think that I just mentioned that to say that the goal here is access and opportunity, not so much to try to have one group or another participate more or less than the other. So just want to food for thought.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thanks, Arturo. All right, we're at the time. Anybody have any last minute things? No?
Hey guys.
Yeah.
I'm Wade. I just came on in the last 2 meetings. I have a technology consulting company and I started doing health consulting, looking at engaging individuals with challenges and bringing out meaning in their journeys. I'm also on a team to build a mental health wayfinder for our city to have a smart matching system between individuals and services in the community. But you've been working about kind of capacity and work in the economy. So I've just been following that. I don't know if I have anything smart to say about that, but it's a good thing. And I kind of got on the tail end of this thing you're organizing. So I'm not sure what it is, some sort of educational or sprint to build some sort of educational platform or something. I don't know, but so it's all good. I haven't really been following Open Collective for a long time, but I posted it to my meetup, which is the Calgary Business App Hub. And I also have a cybersecurity meetup called Calgary's, or the Calgary Security Hub, CalSec Hub, yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for being with us. I really appreciate you being along for the ride and, look forward to your input going forward. Well, thanks so much, guys. I really, really appreciate it. And really, really awesome, just to have everybody here. I'm so grateful for your time and your energy every week. This is really awesome. And it sounds like we've got some really great to-dos to do from the article. And then we're going to get the results from the survey from Brian and Karine and Arturo and take a look at that. And then really frame out the workshop so we can get some dates and talk about who are the right participants to participate in it. So thanks again. Have a great weekend. And we'll talk to you guys next week.